First of all, thank you to everybody who's made this possible. It's extraordinary, and I'm just amazed by this place. It's wonderful. I drive past it every day, not realizing what a resource we have on our doorstep. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, I was a nurse in the National Health Service for 34 years. I worked at the University Hospital. The last 22 years of my career was spent as a senior sister in the neonatal intensive care unit. I'm not a midwife, but by definition, if you work in neonatal intensive care, you have to acquire a huge amount of midwifery knowledge without actually ever delivering a baby. And having attended hundreds of high-risk deliveries and being called when the crash bleep goes off, I'm sort of an honorary midwife, but I've never actually delivered a baby. So this was the last thing in my life I planned on doing. 12 years ago, at the age of 57, I was thinking of drifting towards retirement. And then on the 26th of June, 2005, I worked what should have been a 12-and-a-half-hour shift on the neonatal units, and it turned out to be 14-and-a-half hours. It was frantically busy. We had literally physically run around on the unit. And so I got home at 10 o'clock. It was a Sunday night. I put the kettle on and switched the television on to watch the news to see what had been going on in the world during the day. And then at the end of the news at 10:15, I thought, I'm not going to bother even making the coffee. I'm going to go to bed. And I reached for the remote control to turn the television off. And I thought I shouldn't do that. We should save the planet. And I should turn it off with the switch. And I'm sure you've all been in the situation where you're so tired. You've had such a hard day that your legs won't work. And so by the time I got out of the chair, the newsreader had said, and it was Darren Jordan, I even remember who it was, he said, in Panorama, which is coming up, there's a report from the Central African country of Chad, where a single doctor is fighting to save the lives of pregnant women. And I literally physically turned around and sat down in the chair. If I'd used the remote control to turn the television off, or I'd been quicker getting out of the chair, none of this would have ever happened. I would never have seen the program. So I watched this program from Chad, a hospital, the biggest in Chad, in the capital, N'Djamena, where they deliver 12,000 women a year. And in this hospital, they were losing at least one mother every single day. At least one mother. And nearly a quarter of the babies were dying in and around the time of birth. So Dr. Grace Kadinda, who was the star of the whole program, said to the camera, we lost we lost a woman on Saturday, we lost a woman on Sunday, we lost a woman today. No, we've lost 2 women today. And at that point in Cardiff, we'd lost 2 women in 12 years. It was like a kick in the gut, really. And I just thought, I don't know what I can do, but I must be able to do something. So at the end of the program, I made a very strong mug of coffee. I got the atlas out to see where Chad was, so I didn't know, really. And I switched on the computer and wrote to the producer. Went off to bed. And then on the Tuesday, the producer got back to me and copied me into all the other people who'd contacted them. About 80 people had contacted them, offering help. And so I thought, well, I've done this now. What am I going to do next? It was pretty obvious to me that these women were dying because of poverty. If they went into hospital and needed medication to treat fairly common pregnancy-related complications, if they had no money, they died. There's no grey area here. If you go into a hospital and the medicines are on the shelf and you've got money, you get them. If you haven't got money, you don't get them. And in some cases, some of the medications weren't available anywhere in Chad anyway. And these are medicines that are on the shelves of every maternity hospital in the West. So the obvious thing was to try and raise some money and get some medicines, which sounds simple, really. But so I then went to my trade union, Unison. I was chair of the branch, and said, can we adopt this hospital under the banner of making poverty history? I came out of the meeting with a pledge for £5,000, quite persuasive, really, £5,000 to start the pot off to get the medicines out. And so by the end of August, so 2 months later, the medications were on their way. And then somebody in the group came up with the idea of a small number of us with very specific skills actually going to Chad. So because of my neonatal background, I was asked to be one of the small group. So exactly 5 months after I saw this program that I wasn't meant to see, I was sitting in the hospital talking to the doctor who was the star of the program about the whole, how we couldn't have ignored this. The week before we went out, the BBC contacted us and said, we're going to do a What Happened Next episode on you, so you'll have a film crew with you. So the two people who made the original programme were with us, and so they followed us around. And it's on our website, the leaflets are around. If you click on videos and look at What Happened Next, you'll see it, and they've cut in some of the original programme and then us there. And just to warn you, you'll see me trying to resuscitate a baby. I was teaching resuscitation, and they carried a baby in who wasn't breathing, and I tried to resuscitate him, but sadly he had more problems than could be dealt with in there. So just to warn you in case you're squeamish. So that's how it all started. And then while we were there were two representatives of the UNFPA, which is the wing of the United Nations which deals with reproductive and child health. And they asked if we would keep in touch with them and let them know how we were getting on, which we did. And then within a few months, Dr. Grace was writing to us, saying that where they were losing at least one woman every day, so you're talking 30 to 40 women a month were dying, and nearly a quarter of the babies were dying, that now they estimated that around 25 women a month were surviving who would otherwise have died, and the newborn mortality rate dropped from 23 to 7%. So that was literally within a few months and with very little resource. So we were feeding this information back to the UNFPA men who'd asked us to do that. And then in February 2007, we went back to Chad to see how things were, and vastly improved. Morale amongst the staff was much better. So we fed all of this back and then to the UN chaps. And in May of 2007, they wrote to us and said, can you help Liberia and Sierra Leone in the same way that you're helping Chad? Now, at the time, we were a little organisation run out of the back bedroom of my home off an old laptop. And so here were the United Nations coming to us to say, can you help Liberia? No mean task, really. So we had to have a rethink about what we were going to do. So I'll come back to that, but that just gives you the background to where we started. So I'd like to introduce you to my paternal grandmother. My dad was born in Llunapia, Tonopandi, in 1911. He was the 7th surviving child of the family. His parents had lost 3 other children. And then when my dad was 3, coming up for 4, his mother went into labour with the 11th pregnancy, and she and the baby died. So my dad grew up without a mother, and we grew up hearing firsthand from my dad what it was like not having a mother in the home. And this is the only link I can think of that made me react to that programme. Because we've all seen programmes when you think, well, this is terrible, somebody should do something. And this is the only thing that I think made me continue on and pursue getting involved. So I'll come back to the cause of her death because we didn't know why she died. All we knew was the 2 of them died. And in a little 2-up, 2-down house. And I've actually been back to the house and knocked the door and said, can I come in? This is where my grandmother died. So 2 years ago, on the anniversary or the centenary of her death, we managed to get her death certificate. So as I said, I'll come back to that, but that's the only thing I can think of. So just to give you an overview of the risks to women across the world who are pregnant and giving birth. At the moment, just to give you a baseline, in the UK, the lifetime risk of a woman dying in pregnancy and childbirth is 1 in 8,700. So if you keep that in your mind, 8,700. At the moment, in the USA, a woman is twice as likely to die as she is here. Their lifetime risk is 1 in 4,200. It's because of the healthcare system, and sadly, it's not going to get any better now. If Trump care comes in, this is going to make the situation worse for women. The safest place on earth to give birth is Northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, 1 in 17,400. So a woman is 4 times more likely to die in the US as she is in Northern Europe. They invest heavily in their maternity services. At the time we went to Chad, the lifetime risk was 1 in 11. There's a saying, a woman who is pregnant has 1 foot in the grave. But that wasn't the most dangerous place. At the time, it was Afghanistan, 1 in 8. But now the title is held by Sierra Leone, 1 in 7. And those are just the women we know about. In the rural areas, girls are born, they grow up, they get married, they get pregnant, they die, and they're buried under a bush. And there is no record of them ever having walked this planet. So at the time we started this, the figure was 550,000 women dying every year. 99% of those are in developing countries, and 99% of them are avoidable. It's as we were 100 years ago. So those were the figures we were faced with. So these are, as I said, 550,000. I always ask the question, and no disrespect, but if 550,000 men were dying in the world, do you think somebody would have done something about it? And everybody, well, most people usually nod. Something would have been done. This is about the status of women in the world. By 2012, the number had dropped to 287,000, but now, with everything else going on in the world, it's slipped off the political agenda, and so the numbers are going up again. 303,000 estimated women dying every year. It's just tragic. So, why are women dying in such numbers? And this is a really hard statement to make, but it's true. Women are not dying of diseases we cannot treat. They're dying because society has decided they're not worth treating. Women expect to die. They accept it as a consequence of pregnancy. It's the biggest killer of girls between the ages of 15 and 29. And they feel they have no worth. They accept it as a consequence of pregnancy, either God or Allah's will, and there's no questioning, oh, she's died. She's died. It's tragic. Their status is lower than something that you would scrape off your shoe. And they have no feeling of worth, and it's tragic. We were losing such a huge resource. These are the common causes of maternal death. These include non-medical causes such as domestic violence and road traffic accidents. But the two of the biggest killers are postpartum hemorrhage. So the women give birth and the baby often survives. And at the time we started this, 180,000 women were dying of postpartum hemorrhage every year. One of the other biggest killers is something called eclampsia, which is very high blood pressure leading to kidney failure, leading to toxins building up. That gets into the brain. The woman starts having fits rather like epileptic fits, and then she and the baby die. And that kills 70,000 women every year. And the medication to treat that is available. But it wasn't that what was killing people, women in Chad. And that medication was nowhere to be found anywhere in Chad. So this almost half represents postpartum hemorrhage and eclampsia. So going back to the request from the United Nations, we realized we couldn't do everything for everybody. So we had to take advice on how best to expand what we're doing. So we took advice from Dr. Grace in Chad, from the 2 UN doctors, from local obstetricians, and they said if we home in on the 2 conditions, eclampsia and hemorrhage, and just send the medications to treat those, we would save more lives. So that's what we decided to do. We homed in. Dr. Grace was fine with that. She said, as long as women survive, it doesn't matter. So that's what we did. And then in 2008, the Welsh Government and Cardiff and Vale Trust arranged for me to be seconded out of my clinical role to run this on a full-time basis. And so off I went to Liberia for the first time. 2.5 years out of civil war, every other vehicle, United Nations, travelled it on my own. But the country was decimated. Keep in mind that their healthcare system before the civil war was fantastic. People used to be flown into Liberia for treatment because their system was so good. Now they're flown out, usually to Ghana. Their country was decimated by that civil war. So, and then a year later, I went to Sierra Leone with Oxfam Cymru. So that's what we decided to do, home in and provide the medications for those 2 conditions. So, just to give you a little bit of clinical background, in the UK and the West, women, when they've given birth, once the baby's delivered, they're given an injection called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone, and it acts directly on the uterus. And when the woman is pregnant, of course, the uterus is like a very inflated balloon. Once the baby's delivered, it starts to deflate. Then the afterbirth, and it should deflate down to like a deflated balloon. And that's the oxytocin is acting directly on it. As well as that, we have the safeguard of when a woman starts to breastfeed immediately after the baby's born, the pituitary gland very cleverly says, oh, the baby's feeding, therefore it must be born, therefore we need to start producing oxytocin. So your pituitary gland starts producing it. So we've got a double safeguard here. We've got the injection and the breastfeeding. So massive postpartum hemorrhage is not something we see here. But in these countries, oxytocin has to be refrigerated. It has to be used fairly quickly when it comes out of the fridge. And so you could imagine, you don't need me to tell you the practicalities of that. Even if they have a fridge, the generator may not have the fuel. And so they don't have the oxytocin available. So that's a problem. But there is an oral form of it called misoprostol. And so now that's what we provide. It's tablets, it's stable in any temperature. And so we now send out this misoprostol. And then we provide medical skills training workshops. We apply for grants, look for money to send midwives out. And one of our team is sat at the back. She came back from Liberia last month with us after having spent nearly 2 weeks out there, and she wants to go back. So we provide medical skills training because even with the war, they lost a lot of people, both countries, Sierra Leone and Liberia. And then Ebola. We were just getting off the ground, and then Ebola struck. It was tragic. And so they lost a huge number of their frontline staff. And so the people stepping into that gap really don't have the skills and the experience that the people who were lost. So we took 3 steps forward and then 5 back, really, because of Ebola. But we weren't prepared to be put off by that, so we're back there. And then we send out lots of baby clothes. The cost of the misoprostol tablets is, we were buying it, and then we were paying 17 pence. I managed to negotiate the same price as the NHS pays for it, which was 17 pence. And a woman would need a minimum of 3. So we're talking 51 pence. And it's given to the woman as soon as the baby's born, under the tongue, and it absorbs straight into the bloodstream and has almost the same effect as the injection. So at the time, we were buying it. And then I met an organisation here in Cardiff called International Health Partners. And they're an organisation that was set up after the tsunami. And a lot of good people up in the home counties realised that a lot of people died, not directly because of the wave, but because they had developed things like chest infections and other complications, and there was no medication out there. So these people got together and approached the big pharmaceutical companies and said, if you donate medications to us, we'll store them safely. And they chose Oxford, fairly near the airport. And as soon as there's a natural disaster, we'll ship them out. And in fact, if there is a natural disaster, there's no point in me even ringing them because I know they're up to their eyes. So I met them here, and they said every now and again we get a donation of misoprostol from Pfizer. Now, even though it is an emergency drug in the situation in Africa, it's not an emergency situation in a natural disaster. So they said, are you interested? And I said, yeah. So, and what Pfizer make is the Rolls Royce of misoprostol. It's the very best on the market. So every now and again, they would send us a donation, and then we didn't have to pay for it, just to ship it. And then, as part of what we do, we expect all the hospitals that we supply to send us data on impact and usage and stock levels so we can anticipate when we need to send the next stock, but also stories, case studies. So we were getting all this back, and I thought, I'll send this to IHP because they probably never get these stories. They're sending out squillions of doses of things, but they never get any impact information. So I was sending it off to them, and then gradually I noticed that they were making more of the misoprostol available to us. They were ringing me more often. I thought, this is good. So then, halfway through the Ebola crisis, we had requests from the Ministry of Health of Sierra Leone and Liberia to say, is there any chance you could send us extra because we want to give it to the women prophylactically. We want to give it to them to prevent or to exclude other issues because of course with Ebola, you hemorrhage from every orifice. I don't know if you realise that, but it's horrendous. So I rang IHP and I said, you haven't got 30,000 tablets of misoprostol available, I suppose. And the lady I was dealing with, Janet, said, yes, we have, Angela. I said, oh, great. She said, we weren't going to tell you this yet, but I'm going to tell you now. All those reports that you've been sending us, we've been forwarding to Pfizer in New York. And Pfizer have come back to us and said, however much misoprostol Angela wants, Angela's got. So we have now got an unlimited supply of this most precious medication directly from Pfizer, brand new. And we just have to raise the funds to ship it out. So that, as far as I'm aware, that's going to continue, but who knows, tomorrow that may stop. But this is the best on the market, everybody wants. There are some other types, huge, great tablets, and women need at least 4 or 5. But this is the one that everybody wants. So this is a baby. In 2009, I was invited by an organisation in Pontypridd called Pont, and they twin with Mbale in eastern Uganda, and they asked if I would set it up over there. So off I went to eastern Uganda, and I went into an orphanage, and this little chap was there. Now, he won't remember me, but I'll never forget him. His dad disappeared when he knew Mum was pregnant, and Mum died of a postpartum hemorrhage just after he was born. So he's going to be there now until about 2026, 2027. We do get occasional reports, and he's doing okay, but it's tragic, really, for 50 pence with medication. Now, all our medication has got to be given free of charge. There's no negotiation on this. We're given it by Pfizer on that ground. And so it's got to be given free of charge. And if I find out, and I have, that women are being asked for money, and they can be asked for up to $10 per tablet, we will stop. And we have. We stopped sending because of the way it's been managed. And the other thing that people find really strange, and that is a good reason, is that for the women, we don't want the women to know where the medications come from. The reason is I try to put myself in the position of women going into hospital who are either already sick or become sick in the hospital. And if the doctor then comes to me and my family and says, you're very sick, you need medication, here we wouldn't have to think twice. But in these countries, your first thought's going to be, I haven't got any money, I'm going to die. And if then the doctor says, it's okay, we've got the medication you need, and you don't have to pay for it, my first thought would be, wow, somebody thinks I'm worth saving. So our idea is that we want the women to feel valued and to feel that somebody cares about them, their country, their government. It doesn't matter. But if I thought my life depended on some mad Welsh woman diving around everywhere, dragging money out of people, it doesn't do much for your self-esteem, really. So we want them to think that their country and their government value them enough. So you can imagine we've got a waiting list. So currently we're sending medications to the largest recipients are Sierra Leone, Liberia, about 70 health centres and clinics in the two countries, the original hospital in Chad, one hospital in the eastern Congo, St. Vincent's near Bukavu, 4 hospitals in Cameroon, one in Malawi, and about 12 health centres in Somaliland. And so in 2015, we sent over 400,000 tablets of misoprostol, none of which we had to pay for, but just the shipping. Now, on the basis that a woman would need a minimum of 3, but mostly 4, that's 100,000 women who have this medication available to them. This lady, I went to Redemption Hospital to Monrovia, Liberia's capital, in September 2013, pre-Ebola. And I went to visit Redemption, which was the first hospital I ever visited in Liberia. The lady at the back is a midwife called Yama. She has worked all through the Ebola crisis. These midwives are heroes, really. I mean, they're really on the front line. Imagine going to work thinking, am I going to contract a deadly disease today? Because that's what they were doing. So Yama, she's fine. The lady with the pink scarf is the mother of the baby I'm holding. This is her 9th baby. All the other children have survived. And I just said, I'm a visitor. She knew that she was poorly after she had the baby, and you can see a drip stand here, but she had a massive postpartum hemorrhage after this baby was born, and her life was saved with our medication. So you can imagine, I really am very uncomfortable with this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel really uncomfortable with it. And so she just thinks I'm a visitor holding her baby, but our little organisation actually returned her to her 9 children. Imagine what would have happened to those children if she had died. So she doesn't know. There are 2 women in Africa who know where the medications come from, and this is one of them. Redemption Hospital again, mum called Hana, same name as my grandmother, lives in a slum, you can see at the back there. She went into Redemption Hospital to give birth. She had a massive postpartum hemorrhage, and our guy out there, Abdul, who is just wonderful, the pharmacist, he got the misoprostol, and he knew I was coming some months later. And so he told the mum where the medication, he broke the rule about where the medication came from, so she decided to call the baby after me. So her name is Andrea. My mother's name was Alice, and mum's name is Hana. Spooky. I did say to her she'll probably talk sooner than any other child of the same age, and faster, and she'd probably have a little Welsh accent. But Angela started school, And so we're sponsoring her through school. My husband and I are sponsoring her through school. And I go to see her every time we go. But if that mum had died, the chances are Angela wouldn't have survived. Because if a mum dies, the chances of those children surviving to the age of 5, the chances of them dying multiply tenfold without the mum being there. So this is a piece of history at Redemption Hospital, because prior to our intervention in 2008, they were losing between 8 and 12 women a month. Once the medications started going in, that dropped to 3 to 4. And then we started the training program for the midwives. And this is the records for July 2013, the first time in the whole of their history they had no maternal deaths and no newborn deaths. First time ever. The midwives dragged me into their little area to look at this, and so I took a picture of it. I can't not mention Ebola. It is slipping into the history a little bit, but it broke our hearts really, because I was banging on about how we weren't doing anything. It's right, it's Africa. But Ebola was 7 hours from this country. And it was only when a white nurse got it that the world sat up and took it. And the whole of London was brought to a standstill for Pauline to be taken to the Royal Free, and the male nurse as well. But there were Liberians dying in the street over there, and whole families decimated and hospitals decimated. So you can imagine how they felt. We're supposed to be an equal world. And here we are. They've sent an aircraft for these people and a team, and people were dying on the street. People I know have known since 2008 are dead of Ebola. There are not many people in this country who know people who've died of Ebola, but I do. The medical director of Redemption Hospital, Dr. Dada, an incredible man, could have earned a fortune in the West, but decided to stay all through the war. Wonderful guy, sat in on our workshops, actively encouraging his staff to learn. In October 2014, contracted Ebola and was dead in a week. So people I know, and Andy are also in Sierra Leone, so it really hit very hard. But we stayed with them. I kept talking to the ministry, we're not going to desert you, we're going to come back when it's all over. So on May the 9th, 2015, a Saturday, Liberia declared Ebola free. On the Monday, I booked my flights, and on the 1st of June, off I went to Liberia. There were 2 cases after I'd been there, but they were dealt with very swiftly. So these countries are now very different. There's a huge amount of publicity about Ebola, how to spot it, and they're determined that this is not going to happen again. Everywhere you go, it smells like a swimming pool. There's chlorine everywhere. You wash your hands. Even now, I came back 2 weeks ago from Liberia, and still, you have to wash your hands and your temperature is taken. And then when we went, we had a film crew with us. And so I said to the ministry, is there any chance we could go and film inside an Ebola treatment unit? And this guy, John Harris, who's brilliant, he's regards himself as one of my sons now. He took a deep breath and he said, Angela, CNN have asked us if they can go in, and we've said no. Reuters has asked if they can go in, and we've said no. But you can go in. So this is us just outside the Ebola treatment unit. I've got the bright green bag over my shoulder. The blonde girl you can see in the middle is Emily. She's a Cardiff midwife, and we're all just about to go in. It was the most extraordinary experience, really. It was quiet. The children's area had Disney cartoons painted on the white plastic walls. The male areas had of course, they're all huge football fans, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal and Liverpool, and some of the European teams. But it was really quite surreal standing there where so many people had died. And this is just my last but one slide. When we went to Liberia on that visit, it was the middle of the wet season, so I wanted to go across and see Angela Alice. And so Abdul said, the road between here and where she lives is flooded, so we can't get there, but we'll go to the market. So off we went, and the 4 midwives, I said to them, just pan out, see if you see any pregnant women, get talking to them. And then I noticed that a lot of women were walking around with black dust from their knees and all over their feet. And I said to Abdul, what's that? And he pointed to this shed that we're in, and he said, the women have big chunks of charcoal brought in, and they break it up into small bags, and then they sell it for cooking. So I wandered over and started speaking to the lady in the middle. And I said, anybody here pregnant? or have a relative who's pregnant. And she disappeared off and brought back the girl in blue. You can't see from this picture, but this girl is very pregnant. A beautiful girl. And I said to her, how many months pregnant are you? And she said 10. I thought, well, good job we've got 4 midwives outside. And I said, is the dad around? No. Where are you going to have the baby? At home. Why don't you go into hospital? I knew the answer. Why don't you go into hospital? It costs $50 to go into hospital. So I said, well, who's going to be with you? My mum. I said to Mum, have you ever been with somebody having a baby before? No. Now, I'm not a midwife, but my basic knowledge tells me, you look at, I'm not very tall, but that girl was barely 5 feet tall. She got a huge pregnancy, and I thought, there's no way she's going to have a normal delivery. No way she's going to have a normal delivery. So I said to Abdul, which would be the hospital that she would go to? And he said JFK, named after John F. Kennedy, but its nickname was Just for Killing. And I said, so they have our medicines on the shelf, don't they? And he said, yeah. I said, but they don't pay for it, do they? No. I said, okay. Can you negotiate with them when she goes into labour that she goes in and has the baby free of charge? So that was on the Monday. Tuesday, we went to see Angela Alice, flew home that night. Wednesday night, Abdul rang me and said, the girl in the marketplace, she went into JFK. She had to have a cesarean section. She went into obstructed labour, and she and the baby are fine. Now, if it hadn't been raining, if the road hadn't been flooded, if we hadn't gone to the market, I have no doubt in my mind, and Hugh Dell will confirm this, that girl and her baby would be dead. She would be dead. They would both be dead. And so another bit of serendipity, if you want to call it, I don't know, but she called the baby Angela as well. So there's now 2. But that girl would be dead. It's just a travesty. It just, I really find it hard to find the words to describe this situation in the 21st century, that this is still happening. I just want to come back to my grandmother and the cause of her death. We found her death certificate. And by the way, my father's older siblings who remember their mother all thought that I looked like her from the time I was young. I don't know. But the 2 causes of death on her certificate were premature labour, and keep in mind, I mean, it's not a cause of death. It's a cause of death for the baby, but not for the mum. And so I looked after premature babies for 22 years of my career. But the main cause of death was postpartum hemorrhage. My grandmother, 102 years ago, on the 16th of April, 1915, hemorrhaged to death in a little house in the valleys. And that's killing now 100,000 women every year still in the world. And it's all preventable. So that's her legacy to me, I think. I don't know. I still don't know why I reacted in the way I did, but I think she's the only link to it. So she's been sitting on my shoulder, I think, all these years, waiting for this, the light to go on in my brain. And so, you know, when I worked in special care, I used to think, God, I love this job. They're going to have to drag me off when I'm 85. And now I've walked away from it, and this is what I'm doing. And to look in the eyes of a woman, as I did with Angela's mother, and know, and she knew as well, that without what we'd done, neither of them would be there, is the most extraordinary and magic moment, really, because Angela may grow up and find a cure for some terrible disease. She may end up as the president of her country. Who knows? But neither of us said anything about the fact that our medication had saved her life. But it was like, you know, there was this bond between us. And so here, if a baby died in our care, you know that everything possible has been done and the baby wouldn't have survived anywhere. But here, to know that women are dying for the want of 50 pence worth of medication or some good midwifery skills, or even baby clothes, because our baby clothes are used to entice mums to come in during the pregnancy to be checked out, and they're given some baby clothes, so they've got a little nest egg. For such simple resources, it's just tragic. And the world can't continue losing this resource, these precious women. And the countries where maternal mortality has been addressed and reduced, what they're finding is that women are becoming empowered, they're having smaller families, And so it's just about trying to make them feel that somebody cares about them, but they don't know that it's us. So thank you so much for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions if that's the next. Thank you.
Thank you.